All right, most people will tell you that you should shoot B-roll. I say, don't shoot B-roll. Think about this for a second. How do you even mount an antenna up there? I don't even know. Like, I have these straps, but I don't know how it's gonna mount. I need like a pole that I need to attach up there. Yeah, I need to think. That's actually what I need. But where do I find something like that? Oh. Really? That's what I get for living on a farm, I guess. Now the chainsaw in itself doesn't tell a story, but I mean, it does create a more dynamic type of story, even though it has nothing to do with B-roll. It does create some feeling that, you know, it's larger than life type of thing. At least that's what I think. Now, this chainsaw, it doesn't really say that much, right? But I still think this makes it a little bit more fun. Either way, it's more fun. Now, how do you shut this off? But either way, if we're talking about, you know, shooting B-roll, let's say you have one camera or two, it doesn't really matter. Now I shoot with two cameras. I have one that's on a tripod, and then I have this one which is handheld. It can be different times and different cameras and all that. But you should really think about, you know, rigging yourself in a way that makes sense to how you work, like not having to find a new way every time you do something. What I usually think is, like, I have to have an effective way of doing stuff, otherwise I might not do them. So for instance, my effective way of doing things is having one handheld camera and then one a little bit further, so that it's easy to get a certain type of shots. So then you can sit here and, I mean, I can cut out to that one, but probably I'll just use it in the beginning of a shot to kind of establish things, and then it just keeps rolling, but I'm still, you know, focused on this one and looking into the camera. Now, if you want to create a cinematic mood or something, I mean, B-roll, in the sense that it's usually used, can be a good thing, if you look at it, like to emphasize the cinematic quality. But it would be even better if you have an idea of what the hell you're doing with that B-roll. So if you have a plan for how to tell a story, like a narrative idea of the B-roll, then it isn't, to me, B-roll. It's essential material to tell your story. And that's how I think you should think about things. You really need to think about, like, okay, so let's say we look at the Pearl of Africa, for instance. I had a scene in the hospital where I was following Cleo and Nelson, and as you know, the feeling was getting more and more like something will happen, like maybe she will die type of feeling. You can sense it in the room, you can sense it when you shoot, and so that means that you start to think about it when you go home for the night, for instance. And to me, I was starting to think, like, how do you tell not a straightforward story that is exactly what you see? Because you can't be in the hospital bed forever. how do you tell a story that's saying the same thing but it's more cinematic? Like it touches deeper on an emotional level than the reality does. That's basically what I think you should emphasize when you do B-roll. So what I did was that I went out and I shot in the evening just by myself, just inserts in the city. And you would consider that to be B-roll, but I had a really like solid idea of how I would use it, just to have a floating camera through the streets of Bangkok as they were still in the hospital bed. And that was thought out on location. It wasn't something I just went out and shot without a plan or anything. I usually don't shoot B-roll without a plan. Now, it can be a little bit more sloppy. I might not know exactly what I'm gonna do with the material, but I always have like a stomach feeling of what I want to do with it. And that I think is essential when you try to, become a great cinematographer. You really need to look at things visually. How do you express things? How do you tell stories with images and not through the most traditional straight up showing what is happening? Because that doesn't become the most emotional thing. You need to think about like how do you tell a story on a deeper level than reality is, because that's what great cinematic storytelling is all about. It's not about having slow motion shots with some moody music and that sort of thing. That is not cinematic at all. It's just what people on YouTube use or whatever. It's not what a big Hollywood cinematic thing is. I think people most of the time, if you're working in film, people hate that shit. People hate it so much. Like that is just like doing stuff without any idea what you're doing. Don't do that. Plan things out. Try to tell a story with all the images that you're shooting or covering. Don't just shoot anything. Don't just keep shooting when you have your story. Don't keep shooting all night just because you're worried that you're not gonna have coverage.